Hello everyone, welcome to the Kevin Lee Social. Thank you for tuning in. What initially began as an 8-part series interviewing entrepreneurs to share and inspire how they've successfully pivoted during COVID-19, I have decided not only to continue this series, but also to expand on the scope to understand and learn about people's craft, philosophy, the challenges they face in the industry, and their favorite failures that have helped shape them to become who they are today. By going deeper and understanding different thought leaders, businesses, and industries, the idea is to help cross-pollinate ideas applicable in your life and inspire action in this new norm we live in. I hope you enjoy the show. Thank you. Before we get on with the show, today's podcast is sponsored by Altitude Tea. Altitude Tea specializes in rare and exotic teas you can't find on supermarket shelves. Teas grown on high altitudes are more nutrient-dense due to the cold nights and misty peaks that slows the growth of the tea plant, leading to a higher concentration of aromatic oils and richer flavors. They are located in Waterloo and they do private tea ceremonies where you can learn how to drink tea mindfully using a traditional gongfu set and have over 20 varieties of tea to choose from. For our listeners, you can use the code BEYOND at checkout for 15% off. Today we have Drew Simon. He is a non-profit enthusiast with 10 years of leadership experience in the non-profit and higher education sectors. Drew holds a Master's of Education and has served as a senior leader, director, and advisor for multiple non-profit and charitable organizations. More recently, Drew has helped charities working all over the world secure over $3.3 million in funding to support their charitable efforts. Through his work in the non-profit sector and passion for blockchain and crypto technologies, Drew has been able to see the potential for this revolutionary technology to change the world for the better. Everyone, please help me welcome Drew. Hi, Drew. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing great, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
Thank you and welcome onto the show. I am excited to connect with you today and explore different ideas in the Web3 and also the crypto altruism space. Let us begin with what crypto altruism is about and why did you start it?
Yeah, so it started on a bit of a whim about 8 or so months ago. But to tell you a little bit about it first, before I tell you how I got here, it's a platform dedicated to highlighting the good of Web3. There's a lot obviously out there about the not so good. You hear in the news about cryptocurrency, it's all just scams. It's all ransomware folks. It's all only used by criminals. It's terrible for the environment. But really, I think there's so much good that can be done with the technology around Web3, blockchain, cryptocurrency to really do good in the world. And what I am dedicated to doing is really highlighting this good and creating a platform through a podcast, a blog, through creating resources such as infographics, curated lists of projects to really shine a light on the good in the space and to really help build up the capacity of the space to do good as well. So how this all kind of came about, my work history is really in the social impact space. So for about, the past 10, 15 years, I've held a number of executive roles, advisor roles for different nonprofits and charities in Canada and the United States and really around the world. And I'm also a consultant as well for strategic planning and fundraising for charities. And I work with a number of charities all over the world. And I fell a bit down the rabbit hole, so to speak, a couple of years ago when I first came across cryptocurrency. It was more just kind of interested in the technology behind it. I'm not myself a super techie person, but I've always been very interested in technology. But then about a year ago, I really started to see more about some of the social impact use cases, starting with kind of charities accepting cryptocurrency donations, but also how a blockchain can be used to just create really cool solutions to complex challenges. But at the same time, I was really struggling to find a solid place where I could go to for resources or information or somewhere where I could point people to, because I was working with these nonprofits and charities and said, hey, you should really look into this. But I was getting a lot of pushback about, I don't know, it seems a little sketchy. I don't really know much about it. It's confusing. So I really wanted to make a space that was more accessible to those in that social impact world looking to break into Web3 and all that, the good that comes with it. And also to help, elevate individuals and collectives and projects in the space that are using this technology for good. And like I said, primarily do that through my podcast, my blog, and as well as just creating resources and doing some consulting work with projects as well.
You brought up a couple of points. It's a very exciting space, the whole crypto space, and I can see why you got excited. I myself fell in that rabbit hole, and it's a deep rabbit hole.
Sure is, yeah.
Even the more deeper you go, the more you realize you don't know. It's one of those topics. And
yep.
It's confusing for people who are trying to go down the rabbit hole, let alone for people who are new to it and trying to adopt that technology for for their workspace or company or organization, wherever it may be. So I can see I can see where you're trying to go with this and creating that resources for them to bridge over and make it easier for them to access. And by doing so, we can get more mass adoption eventually over.
Absolutely.
Would mass adoption or along those lines something that would be the ultimate goal for crypto altruism?
I think really what the ultimate goal is for crypto altruism is really to just help elevate the technology and the community around the technology so that we can use it to its full potential. Web3 is not a panacea for everything in the world. It's not going to solve all the world's problems. It's not going to eradicate poverty. It's not going to solve world hunger. But the technology can really be used to complement pre-existing solutions and to improve processes to make it a lot easier to solve these problems. It can make things a lot more efficient, accessible to those that traditionally have lacked access to financial tools and resources, that have lacked the tools they need to really be economically empowered and to achieve financial success and independence. So it really is something that can bring greater equity to the world. And so really, I think what the ultimate goal for crypto altruism is to really be a one-stop shop for those in the social impact space who want to learn more about Web3, and those in the Web3 space to learn about how they can apply the technology to do good, and then to give them some resources and information and inspire them to use these talents and skills to solve some of humanity's most pressing problems. And I think that where I'm coming from with crypto altruism and what the ultimate goal is really to be a catalyst for good and using this technology for good, because the potential is huge. And I'm sure as we go through this conversation, I'll have a chance to share some of these really cool examples of how this technology has been used to do real good, to improve processes, and to create a more equitable world for those who have traditionally, been excluded.
It's an interesting space for me as well, because a few weeks ago, some friends and I launched an organization called the Butterfly Effect DAO. And so what we hoped to do was to raise funds through visual campaigns to then donate it to either green startups that will move the needle in that space, or community-driven initiatives that we can see happening and making a difference. And a platform like yours would have been so much help if we had discovered it a bit earlier to understand that. Because for us, navigating that space alone was trying to find out, okay, how does this work? How do we go about this? We understood the vision behind it, but then how do we take that a step further and give it a go? And so it's great that you're creating that kind of structural blueprint or resources to share with people to help them to come over. And you have a platform, you do podcasts, and you're being such an early adopter in the whole crypto and Web3 space. How are you navigating the space? And I wonder if you see any complications that may arise in the future.
Yeah, for sure. So I think that we mentioned earlier, and you said that you've fallen down the rabbit hole, and it's a very deep rabbit hole. And the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know, and it's never ending, right? And so I think that I've been cognizant of that and recognize that I can't be an expert at every single aspect of the space. There's just too much. And that's okay. And I'm never going to be an expert in everything. I'm never going to be a dev. I'm never going to understand the mechanics of the smart contracts behind the DAO. I can understand them enough to explain them, but I'm not going to understand the code that's underlying them, for example. So really for me, I think that I've learned that to navigate the space successfully, you have to rely on the support of the community. And when you have questions, one thing I found that's been great about the spaces, and I'm sure you have as well, is that it's been extremely inclusive and open. And there's few spaces where you can really, like in the Web3 space, DM someone who's maybe a founder of a really cool project or a leader in the space, and realistically probably get a response and probably get help, because it's one of those spaces where it's collaboration over competition. And so I've recognized that I'm not the expert at all things, not being afraid to lean on others for support that are. And I think one of the biggest challenges I've seen in terms of looking at complications that may arise in the space, being so new and there's still being some uncertainty maybe around regulatory clarity, still having those stigmas in the space around crypto's only for criminals or only used for nefarious purposes, yada. I found that it is kind of the charitable world or the social impact world is still a little hesitant to engage with Web3. And a lot of it comes down to being a nonprofit or charitable organization. You have to be risk averse in a sense, right? You're the steward of donor funds. You're doing a lot with a little. You have to be careful. And nonprofits are usually a tad bit slower to adapt to these new technologies than other spaces. We actually saw the same thing way back in the day with credit cards. Nonprofits being hesitant to accept credit card donations because who in the world would want to enter their credit card number online? And we've seen how that's changed. And I'd like to think that it'll be the same with cryptocurrency as well. And a great book actually that speaks about that It's called Bitcoin and the Future of Fundraising. Just a side note there. Great book to definitely look into. But anyways, back to the point, I think with that risk aversion, there's been a little hesitation, and there's still a lot of those in the social impacts, charitable space that are hesitant and not willing to engage at this point. And so that's one of the complications or challenges that I've run into is how do we make it more accessible and open and encouraging for them and to show them the other side of how this can really be used to benefit their organization and their missions. And I think that's one of the big complications that has arisen. And I think that also there's a lot of noise in the space. There are unfortunately a lot of bad actors in the space. There are scammers. There are people looking to make a quick buck, even in the social impact Web3 side of things, in a space where there maybe isn't that same level of regulation as there is in other spaces, which for better or for worse comes with its challenges as well. And so I think that also adds to the hesitation of these those nonprofits and charities to interact with the space because they're worried that they're going to partner with the wrong partner and it's going to result in them getting rug pulled or scammed or losing trust with their donor base. And so they have to be really careful. And so I think that's one of the complications is navigating through that noise and presenting to these organizations, to these individuals, the good and providing them with a reliable space to go to learn about the good so that they can feel more confident engaging with the space.
Yes, absolutely. There's so much uncertainty in that space for regular companies, let alone social companies to come and enter. But it is also a wealth of untapped resources for them if done correctly. There is so much resources flowing around the whole crypto space right now. So many windfalls that have been made that people are willing and wanting to do good, but they're not going to transfer it to fiat and then donate. They're going to want to donate it straight as crypto. And how they're doing that or the infrastructure for the social impact companies to be able to receive that is a different story altogether. And I think there's parallel. I see that you also interviewed someone from Endowment. And last week I interviewed Zach Reinstein from the CEO, and it was a great conversation seeing how their company has created a platform for people wanting to donate crypto to social causes. And it was a great platform. I think they're expanding rapidly. And
oh yeah, they're awesome.
Yeah, it's incredible in that space. So hopefully more and more platforms like that come out and people like you building resources and awareness in that space. So hopefully.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, they're a great organization and they're really just making it so much easier for charities or nonprofits to engage with this space. It takes out that unknown or uncertainty of having to set up your own wallet, navigate the process of soliciting and accepting cryptocurrency donations, converting it to fiat currency. Yeah, they just make it so much easier. Them, the Giving Block, Angel Protocol, there's so many great organizations like that that are just creating a more accessible, simple way for these organizations to engage in the space.
Yes, absolutely. Seeing as how your background and the work that you're doing now is a lot in the social impact space, it truly is an incredible time that we're living in with the advancement of technology, the way that we're connecting ways we've never seen before. How do you see the future of social impact as an industry changing?
Yeah, I think that we're already seeing it happen. And I think the beauty of it too is that a lot of the best use cases probably haven't been discovered yet. And that's the really exciting thing is we're discovering these new applications every day for how we can use this technology for good. But I think one, example that's really top of mind right now for everyone, obviously, is the situation in Ukraine and how vital cryptocurrency donations have been in supporting humanitarian organizations and even the Ukraine government. We've seen over the past couple of months, over 100 million in donations to Ukraine, to the government, to various organizations. And I got to say, this is probably one of the first times I've seen too, where the government has actually gone directly to the people via social media and said, hey, here's our wallet address, send us donations. And then individuals all over the world actually being able to send a donation directly to them in a matter of minutes, which is crazy to think about with a low fee, getting money from point A to point B. And I don't recall their name, but it was the deputy minister of, I think, digital transformation for Ukraine said that this has been essential because at a time when it's been hard to access banks, the banking infrastructure in Ukraine has been offline because of the situation there. Crypto has helped them bridge that gap in somewhere close to 40% of the vendors that they've worked with as well for whether it's humanitarian supplies or food or whatever it is, have accepted cryptocurrency as payment. So they've been able to use that to pay these businesses, contractor services for essential services. It's just something so different where it's really redefining the donor, nonprofit, donor, charity, donor cause relationship in a way that we've never seen before. Because when else has the government gone out and said, hey, give us money, and then people respond, been able to send money directly at a low cost and so quickly and efficiently? So that's one that's really top of mind. And I think it's really showcasing the ability of cryptocurrency as a tool during crises to support populations in crises. So I think that's such an interesting one. Another one that really sticks out that I think gets a lot of attention, maybe for all the wrong not all the wrong reasons, but not in many of the ways that it should, is NFTs. The potential there is huge, really, to just disrupt so many aspects of social impact, right? We've seen it not only in terms of charitable fundraising. There's so many NFT projects that will donate a percentage of their funds, let's say, at Mint to some sort of cause or charity, but then also to set it up so that they get recurring revenue through royalties, through secondary sales. So it's really, in theory, creating this ongoing passive income source for charities. And that's not something that's really existed before this. And we've also seen NFTs reshape donor experiences too. We've started to see some organizations issue not charitable tax receipts, but like mementos in NFT to individuals for making a donation. So they get this really cool memento. Maybe they get some sort of wearable in the metaverse as well to recognize their donation. Maybe they get some sort of other badge in the form of an NFT. And also NFTs is a way to really redefine identity for individuals that have lacked access to basic forms of identification in the past that have, disadvantaged them and financially excluded them. So those are a couple of ones, but I think another one that I really want to drive home too that stands out to me in terms of how it's going to change social impact is by decentralizing social impact. We've started to see it, and you mentioned it was Butterfly Effect DAO, you said, right? Your new DAO, and we've seen the platforms that enable communities to really come together and drive social impact as a community, as opposed to having to go through some sort of maybe large centralized nonprofit that's governed by a board of directors. Instead, you can bring a community together, form a DAO, and use that DAO to raise funds for and support social impact startups, charities, distribute grants to the different organizations for various projects. We've seen DAOs take on decentralized science, which I'll actually probably talk a little bit about later on. So decentralizing the process of scientific research and development by bringing a community together and funding scientific research directly, as opposed to them having to go through these gatekeeping bodies, right? We've even seen platforms that enable communities to create their own currencies, which they can use to transact, there's projects that enable communities to create their own universal basic income program. So it's really fascinating, this decentralization of impact as well. And I think that's one of the most important, if not the most important way that Web3 will disrupt social impact, as it will most sectors, right? When it comes to finance, decentralized finance. When it comes to social media, decentralized social media. Like, it's really that decentralization that will change so many facets of our life by putting the power in the hands of the community as opposed to a select few.
That was a lot to unpack, but thank you.
Sorry about that. I went on a bit of a rant there.
No, all good. Some really great points there, and to speak to some of them, it really has taken out a lot of friction for people to get started, I think, as well. Like you're saying, it's what a time where a government can reach out and go, we need your help. And having issues with traditional banking systems, people can go, bam, send funds over them in a few moments. And to reach them in their usable resources. And it's people all around the world. It's amazing. When could people ever do that instantly and on different? Absolutely. And also, as you also mentioned, people wanting to make an impact, and rather than being at the helm of these larger centralized organizations, you can just team together and go, hey guys, what do you guys believe in? What do you guys want to fight for? How can we make it work? Let's do this together. And hasn't been easier ever to really do that. From my experience with the Butterfly Effect DAO, it's just me, a few friends, and people together and partner, and then going, we want to make a difference in the green space. We want to fight climate change. How do we do that? We figured out, let's trial and find out what these NFTs are about. How about we create some art and collaborate with different artists and sell them, and then using that revenue to reinvest, and then create the royalties in perpetuity to reinvest into these projects, social causes. And it's been a journey, like going from 0 to 100 and selling our first collection, and then moving onto our second drop later this month. And we're excited to see where it's going. We've just started. We raised 2,000 for the Ukraine causes, and another 3,000 for reinvest into green projects, which we're letting the community decide what they want to do with this money. Here are some options, or do they have options? Let's vote. How do we put this together? And it's an interesting way to make a difference as a community.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great. And I love hearing about the work that you're doing. And I'm definitely going to have to do more research in butterfly effect DAOs. Sounds like a great project. And so kudos to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Mhm.
Drew, I know you have your, as we've spoken before, you have your own pod. You interview a lot of amazing people, amazing companies, and you release them on quite on a frequent basis as well. So please go check it out at Crypto Altruism, and we'll put all the notes in the show links as well. And being in the front seat, and you're always gathering resources and understanding this new space, what are some of the more unique projects you've seen people develop in this Web3 crypto space? I'm always excited to hear more about what's coming.
Yeah, I think that I was thinking about this and I was joking to myself, but it's really funny, all these acronyms that the projects that really stick out to me are those that kind of fit within the different themes of, which is, funny because it's a little bit of a tongue twister. There's a lot of acronyms there, but DeFi being decentralized finance. So really what I think the purpose of that is to bring these financial tools and resources and services to individuals that have the 1.5 to 2 billion people that have traditionally, been unbanked and lacked access to these resources. And some of the more creative ones I've seen is there's some great projects that make use of USSD based mobile platforms. So essentially what that means is you don't need an internet connection. You don't need a smartphone. Folks with a basic flip phone and SMS capabilities can transact with cryptocurrency, essentially providing them with financial services, mobile banking services without the need for a physical bank, without the need for a smartphone to download the mobile banking app, without the need for an internet connection to log into the mobile banking app. So that's one area that I found fascinating. One that sticks out is Kotani Pay. That does a great job with that. I believe Leaf Global FinTech, another one, is also operates on USSD, which is another great one. But within that decentralized finance side of things, decentralized insurance has also been a big one that I've really been excited about, that I didn't expect and really think about it first, and then came across a couple months ago and have just been really excited about. And one that really sticks out is one called EtherRisk. And what that project does is it provides decentralized crop insurance to smallholder farmers, so protection in case of a extreme weather event that wipes out their crop yield and thus their livelihood along with it. This decentralized insurance built on the Ethereum blockchain and tied into the Chainlink Oracle automatically receives notifications of extreme weather events and then automatically distributes payments to smallholder farmers in the event of extreme weather events. And this platform, because it's built on a smart contract, it's decentralized, it doesn't require all these intermediaries, it can be operated at a fraction of the cost of traditional insurance, so making it a lot more accessible. So those are just a couple of ones that really stick out within DeFi. And of course, UBI, Universal or Unconditional Basic Income, Impact Market is one that really sticks out, that are using cryptocurrency to more efficiently provide basic income to vulnerable populations, whether it's those in refugee camps or remote or rural communities. So those are some that I'm really excited about. The DeFi has always really stood out to me, but I mentioned DeSci earlier as well, decentralized science. And so that's organizations that are essentially usually in the form of a DAO, bringing the community together to fund scientific research and development. And so a good one that sticks out is VITA DAO, VITA DAO, which is essentially crowdfunding and crowdsourcing research into human longevity and aging. And another one's Molecule, which is essentially a market where individuals conducting research can propose their research topic or area and get it funded by the community, who then helps make it open source, protects their IP instead of it going to some sort of massive journal that's going to make a profit off of it. And so that's an area that really sticks out to me as well. I'd say DeFi and DeSci are two big ones. And I also mentioned ReFi, and sorry, I'm spewing a lot here as well, but it stands for essentially regenerative finance, right? So finding creative ways to use cryptocurrency and blockchain to combat climate change, to incentivize more environmentally friendly behaviors. We've seen projects like ClimateDAO, for example, which looks to tokenize carbon credits so that when one purchases some of their climate tokens, it essentially takes carbon credits off the market, thus raising the price of carbon credits and incentivizing corporations and individuals to take on more environmentally friendly behaviors because it gets more costly to offset their carbon footprint. So seeing like just all these, those are some of the areas that really stick out to me for sure. It's hard to pinpoint. It's more instead of a specific project that I really get excited about, it's usually a project that I get excited about, right? Because that's the great thing about the space too, is that there's so many projects working in cohesion together to do good. And there's not competition. It's really a collaborative, open community. So yeah, those are the ones that really stick out to me though.
That's incredible. I've learned something new. Thank you so much for it. That's why I love these conversations, because people are always sharing things that I don't know about. I'm like, okay, I'll note that down. I'll go down that rabbit hole and check it out. Really cool, interesting stuff. Like decentralized insurance. I've never thought of that. And like you said, it was something you never really think of, but makes absolute sense.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
more accessible, and the speed of it, and as well, and yeah, all the politics and stuff like that, you move aside and just get it done. Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, DeSci, refi, definitely new terms to me. But again, absolutely makes sense. DeSci, how many people, PhD students and people going out needing to fund their scientific projects, but the process is long and they don't always get the funding and it's difficult. But get the right like-minded people around the world who may not particularly understand it, but they're willing to invest in the vision, in a sense, to crowdsource and crowdfund that project and get it up and going. You may never meet these people, but it's great to connect, and it's a very interesting space. I'll definitely share it with some of my science friends.
Yeah, for sure.
Excited about
Absolutely.
it. And I guess refi is another thing that I've learned, but it's close to my heart. So in terms of refi projects or projects related to climate change, off the top of your head, are there any particular favorites that you've had or interesting ones? I'm just curious to see what I can look further into.
Yeah, for sure. There's so many good ones out there. I actually posted a blog post fairly recently that it was looking at 20 different ones, highlighting 20 different Web3 projects supporting or focusing on climate change and the environment conservation. So there's several different areas there. So on the one hand, there is the more kind of refi, which is more kind of creating almost like financial incentives for individuals, communities, corporations to change their behaviors and to make them more environmentally friendly. Some of the other ones we've also seen NFT projects, and a couple that come to mind. I actually interviewed one on my podcast previously called Crypto Coral Tribe, which is really cool. They're raising funds with these really cool NFT pieces of artwork that represent. They're designed around the images of coral reef. And in the process, they're funding growing and planting corals and helping regenerate coral populations. We've also seen, trying to think of some other good ones, organization. One that comes up, Climate DAO, so not to be confused with Climate DAO, is one that really sticks out. That is actually, it's a DAO that's bringing people together to purchase equity in companies and to act as activist investors to help encourage the companies and force them to take on more environmentally friendly practices. So again, crazy to think about being able to bring together people to mobilize a movement where you actually may be able to enact change in billion-dollar companies by taking on activist investor positions, right? And encouraging change. So those are a couple that stick out. And obviously there's tons of them and they're not all coming into my mind right now. So definitely check out my recent blog post. I think it was from last week, where I highlighted 20 different projects they're doing great work. There's just so much being done in the space. And another great actually place and resources was Refi DAO, and they actually just maintain a great database of all these amazing projects that are working in the refi and environmental space.
Thank you for sharing those resources. I'll definitely take a look into your blog post and the refi DAO and see what's happening, like what else is happening. And like you said, it's I do believe it's an exploding space, because people are seeing how they can make a difference in using the new platforms, the new technology, the new currency. So and another thing to your point about collaboration, not competition, is that even when I was looking into, after we had raised the funds through the butterfly effect DAO, and thinking, okay, the Ukraine is one thing, and then green startup projects, there are a few that we had in mind, but it's also about, we could also use those funds to support other DAOs in what they're working on. It's not one DAO competing against another DAO. It's just, you guys also have a clear vision of doing something, and you guys are clearly investing something. Let's help you guys out. We've just raised the funds for a visual campaign. So it's not about, I've got a bigger DAO than yours and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So it's great to see that. And also everyone in the community, like you were talking about way earlier, the people in this space are very helpful. They know it's about community. They know everybody's trying to get their head around it. They know that everyone's trying to make a difference in their own way, open to sharing their knowledge and their journey. So just like yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what are some key failures you've observed happen in this space?
Yeah, so I think that there's a few that stick out to me. And I wouldn't say that they're like failures in the sense that all hope was lost or that was an outcome that's not fixable or reversible. But I think that a couple of things that stand out, and I talked about this a bit earlier, is that there is unfortunately a disproportionate amount of bad actors in the space and scams. And again, I don't want to reinforce the stigma that, oh, it's just a space of criminals and crooks and whatnot, because it's not. There's way more good being done in the space than bad, but there are unfortunately still some bad actors in the space. So we've seen many scam NFT projects that have lost individuals a lot of money. And there's even been some that have operated under this, guise of having some sort of social impact focus. So I think it's trying to navigate that noise and make sure that we're creating a space where, those legitimate organizations, whether it's a nonprofit or a social enterprise or whatever it is, that want to enter the space and collaborate and partner with someone who knows with confidence that they're partnering with a well-intentioned, positive, legitimate, reliable partner. So that's one area that I think that needs some work in this space. I've seen a lot of charities also think that by just diving in and setting up a wallet or setting up an account on Giving Block, that they'll just be flooded with donations. And one thing I found with the space is that it is very generous, but you have to work for it, right? You have to really engage in this space. You can't just set up an account or a wallet and send out a few tweets and expect a flood of donations. And what we find is that in the space, the donations that you get are significantly more than the average donation made in the nonprofit sector in fiat currency. In fact, up to close to 90 times, not 90%, 90 times more. We find that less people make donations, but those that do make larger donations. And a great example of that was with a look back at the Crypto Giving Tuesday campaign ran by the Giving Block. The average donation size was somewhere close to $12,500 US, whereas a traditional average donation size in the fiat nonprofit world would be maybe $100 to $150. So massively larger scale, but less. And so you really have to work to build a relationship with donors and make sure that you're engaging with the space fully, as opposed to just thinking that you're automatically going to be flooded with donations, because that's just not the reality. And one thing I think that, and again, not a failure, but something that I think the space has to be cognizant of, is that not associating, unfortunately, with a specific political angle. I think that one thing we've seen is that there has been some in the space that have wanted to take it more to the right, right? Into the way that Web 2 has gone, in a sense. There's been a lot of those more hard right actors embrace cryptocurrency from more of a libertarian point of view. And I'm not here to take a political stance, but I think as a community and as a space, it's important to be cognizant of that and recognize that we're an inclusive space. We're a space that welcomes people from all over the world, from all backgrounds, areas, beliefs, and that we really need to make sure that we're not making a shift to one kind of side of the political spectrum, in a sense, because I don't think that any good's going to come from that. And I think it'll close things off and lead the space down the same kind of path as Web 2 went. So that's just another thing that, again, it's not necessarily failures here, but just definitely things that the community needs to be cognizant of and work towards making sure that we're aware of and addressing. So those are just a few that come to mind. Yeah.
Talking to one of your earlier points, in regards to building trust and showing transparency, how do you see, with your experience coming across different projects, how do you see them building trust or connection with the donors in a way that would allow them to grow in that space? I'm not sure if that question makes sense.
Yeah, I think that there's like a couple different ways that you've seen projects go. You've seen many go the route of venture capital as a way to build legitimacy and trust and to obviously get funding in the process. But then on the other hand, you've seen a lot that are really taking more of a grassroots approach. And those are the ones that I tend to kind of focus on more, have more on my show. And I think from a social impact point of view, typically they start from the grassroots as opposed to being funded by venture capital or whatever. So I think that with those grassroots ones, it's really just about engagement. And I'm not talking about having a Discord channel or Telegram channel or just putting out a bunch of tweets. Real human engagement, having Twitter spaces, having podcasts, hosting events, having founders in a team that's doxed, that is not anonymous or operating under pseudonyms. And just on a side note, I understand that there are times where it can be very valid to not be doxed and to be anonymous. And this could be, for example, let's say that there is a freedom fighter working in Russia that is trying to publish information as an independent journalist. That person probably needs to remain anonymous because for their own safety. So there are examples of times where you would want to remain anonymous. But I think for the most part, to build trust, have that doxed group of founders or that team that is engaging in the community from in a real human way, through having conversations, through hosting Twitter spaces, through attending events, those types of things are the way that you build trust in the community and that you break through. The projects that I found that are more likely to be scams or led by bad actors, or those that has a shady team or a team that isn't doxxed, or that they came out of nowhere. Their Twitter account was started yesterday, but they already have 10,000 followers, which they obviously purchased. Or it's those that don't put out a white paper, don't put out any information, just maybe make a flashy website or pay an influencer to back them up. So I think it's those that steering clear of those things, purchasing influencers, buying follows, doing all those kind of sketchy marketing things, and those that are really focusing on the grassroots, community driven, human connection, building those one-on-one relationships, as opposed to just trying to pump out Twitter posts with 1,000 hashtags and no real kind of substance behind them. So those to me are the I think the things that you got to look out for, and the ways that you can build trust for your project in the community. And I think that kind of exists for any community or any space.
Some great advice there, and it is different advice to growing something in, I would say, in the Web 2 space, in the you're going more grassroots and directly connecting and with people, interactive, like you said, Twitter spaces, which is, I really like that space, except for the noise, trying to find the right space sometimes. But
yeah, there's too many of them.
And being in Australia, so everyone's time zone's like
right. Yeah, it's true.
But that's the beauty of it, all right? You can connect with people all over around the world if you're willing to seek creating live events and all those kind of things to show people that you are really connecting and on the ground floor working with these people.
Absolutely.
Are you excited about any upcoming projects later this year or next year?
Yeah, so I think, like, for me, like I said before, it's hard to pinpoint like specific projects, and I've really tended to focus more on use case areas. So I think for me, it's those DeSci and refi ones that really stick out. In particular, on the refi one, I'm really excited about carbon credit backed currencies. I think that you look at Climate DAO, you look at the work that Toucan Protocol is doing. These are folks that are really looking for creative ways to just change human behavior through financial incentives. And we've already seen Climate DAO lock up millions of tons worth of carbon credits in their treasury, essentially taking it off the market. This is the same amount as countries, and the same footprint of countries, the same annual carbon CO2 output of countries that they've been able to capture and lock away in their treasury. So it's really quite astonishing what they've done. And with DeSci, I mentioned VitaDAO is one that really stands out. And Molecule, those are two in particular that I think are really leading the way from a DeSci point of view and are still very early and new, which I'm really excited about. But also, I guess one more that I want to bring up too is Impact Market. I had them on my podcast a couple of weeks back. I've highlighted their work a lot. They're a decentralized organization that offers universal basic income, or unconditional basic income, rather, solutions to traditionally underserved or marginalized communities. And they've already raised millions and supported thousands of individuals around the world by essentially creating a process where communities can take ownership of their own universal basic income project or unconditional basic income project. And I differentiate between the two because universal is traditionally viewed as like a whole country implementing this kind of more like social welfare UBI program, whereas unconditional is maybe more focused on a specific sub-community or subsector. Anyways, that's a side note. But I think what Impact Market's doing really well is that traditionally UBI programs or any sort of aid program has been driven by a more centralized body, maybe part of a big NGO, located in Europe or North America, providing this support to folks in, let's say, sub-Saharan Africa or Latin America or somewhere traditionally lower income communities. But these individuals don't know the realities of the community. They don't understand the needs. They don't understand, what they're going through. So by creating processes where communities can drive this on their own, they're the ones that manage the funds. They're the ones that determine who's eligible. They're the ones that determine how it's dispersed. There's something really powerful about that. And so I'm really excited to see how that continues to grow, because like many other organizations like an endowment and the Giving Block that have seen exponential growth over the past couple of years, I know that they have as well, and they have some huge plans for the future as well. Those are a few that stick out to me. But I think, like I said earlier as well, one of the really exciting things and coolest things about the space is that the best use cases and the most exciting projects are those that haven't been created yet, because it's so new and there's so much potential and there's so many undiscovered things. And there's new people entering the space every day with different perspectives and different talents. And with that come new ideas. I think, what I say now versus what I'll say even 3 to 6 months from now to this question will be very different.
I'm with you, Drew. It's such an exciting space, and I can't wait to see, all these creative people enter it and the impact they'll make. Like you said right at the very beginning, the energy of and the possibility of impact of crypto technology and this whole Web3 space into the social impact space it's really exciting. we don't know how big it can go, and can't wait to see how it roll out.
Absolutely.
Drew, as we're reaching towards the tail end of our interview, I'd like to ask a couple of questions that I normally ask on every episode.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite book or movie that you'd recommend?
Yeah, so I think books that first come to mind, one that I read recently that's near the top of the list is called Enlightenment Now by Steven Pinker. And really what that is, it's meant to be in defense of enlightenment and progress, because there's been a lot of messaging lately and movements saying that progress progress doesn't exist, or progress hasn't worked, or these using science or humanism to solve humanity's problems hasn't worked. Whereas this presents the case that it has, and that we've made really great progress in a number of areas as humanity. And obviously, we have a lot, more to do, but that we need to be embracing progress and kind of usher in this new era of enlightenment where we aren't afraid to use science and technology to do good. And I feel that really aligns with a lot of what we talked about tonight. So that's one. And, a couple other ones. I'm always a big fan of that. I don't want to say like self-help book. They're really well-researched, scientifically based books focusing on like psychology and personal development. A good one that sticks out that I'm actually reading right now is Atomic Habits by James Clear. I'm sure you've probably heard that one before. Great book. Really helps break down kind of habit formation, backed by science in a way that makes sense and is easy to understand and accessible. And another one that I read recently as well is simply called Grit by Angela Duckworth. And it's essentially focused on how to build grit and determination towards being good at and going all in on one thing, as opposed to like being a jack of all trades, how to really build up the grit and the determination to really be the best you can in one area. And she references many different case studies of Olympians and business people and famous artists. And it's really fascinating. In terms of movies, I actually didn't put as much thought into this one as I maybe should have. There's so much out right now, right? We're in the best time, I think, possible for movies and TV. And I got to say that I'm a huge documentary person. A lot of the movies and shows I watch are docuseries and documentaries. One that I watched just the other day that absolutely blew my mind, and it just really inspired me and made me think through things differently, was, I can't even remember what it was called. It was the one about the divers who rescued the children, the soccer team from the cave in Thailand that was flooded a couple years ago. Struggling, I'll have to find it and send it to you so you can throw in the show notes. But absolutely amazing, and just the amount of effort and work that went into that, and the innovation that went into that, I found very inspiring as well, because it was something that was totally new for them, and they just approached it with a completely novel idea of how to save these children that were trapped kilometers into this cave underwater that nobody thought was possible. And absolutely fascinating. So I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. I do apologize, but I'll definitely find it and send it to you so you can throw it in the show notes.
Thank you, Drew. Some great recommendations, definitely added to my list, and to go check it out. Also a big fan of great docuseries as well, so I can go check it out.
Absolutely.
Are there any new beliefs or behaviors that have had a positive impact in your life in the recent years?
Yeah, so I think, and this one's more relevant, I think, to the Web3 space, and I really struggle with this initially, is that the space is truly 24/7. You look at the markets, first of all, the markets are always open, not like the traditional stock markets that close at 4 p.m. Maybe there's after hours trading, but generally closed. It's always open. There's always a Twitter space going on. There's always some sort of summit or conference or whatnot. So I think that a behavior that I've really had to ingrain in myself is not being afraid to shut off and say no to things, right? So not being afraid to stop work at 5 p.m. or not being afraid to not attend that Twitter space or that conference because it's just, there's too much going on. You can't possibly do everything. And so that's something that I definitely need to get better at. But in terms of specific kind of beliefs or behaviors, I've really tried to, over the last couple of years, embrace mindfulness more, take part in daily meditations as much as I possibly can. And as someone who's usually quite all over the place and has their mind going all over the place, it's something I really struggle with at first, but has done wonders for me, especially relating to being able to turn off after hours and not always having to be on and working, right? And journaling as well is something that's really, specifically bullet journaling is something that's been extremely helpful for me, is just always having my journal at my side. At any time of the day, if something comes to mind that's I need to process or think about or I'm working on, just jot it down, just mind map it, and make sure that you're capturing all that in a place that you can really kind of reflect on and come back to later. So yeah, I think that those have been a couple things that have really had a huge positive impact on my life in recent years.
Thank you for sharing these great 2 points that you shared. And it's true, with the excitement of this whole space, there is always something new. There is new companies, new organizations, new technology, new creators. It's coming out all the time. And it's almost that fear of missing out sometimes, wanting to learn more about that and to be ahead of the curve and understand it all. But you just can't. You just can't. It's too much.
Too much, right?
Like, you would explode, and you've got to draw the line somewhere to go, look, you know what? I just can't make it.
Absolutely, yeah.
I've got to prioritize my sleep or my health or whatever it is, my time with family or whatever you want to put it towards. And not only with things like this, I like to go a little bit deeper and understand in terms of even, for example, your mindfulness practice you've mentioned to help settle you down and not to be as distracted. What does that look like for you generally as a practice on a day-to-day basis? Or
totally
use it?
Yeah, so I think the cool thing about mindfulness is it's different to everyone, right? And it's not just doing this guided meditation every day. Mindfulness, some can be walking their dog. It can be sitting down and just resting and staring off for a bit. And for me, I typically do a 20 to 30 minute meditation every morning, a guided one. I use Headspace. It's worked well for me. It's been a good app. But also I have a very hyperactive dog. And so I have to take her for about 3 or 4 walks a day, about 10K of walks a day. And so to me, that's mindfulness, right? I use that as an opportunity just to ground myself and just think and, breathe and, just take in things around me. So those are the big ones that I use for sure. But I think it's also just the little things of recognizing when I'm worrying too much about the future, stressing out, just taking a step back and focusing on the now. And so it's definitely something that I'm still learning, and I'm relatively new to it over the last couple of years, but it's something that I've gotten a lot better at. And it is done probably more for my life from a positive impact point of view than, any other thing I've done at this point.
That's great to hear. Thank you, Drew. Mm-hmm. If you could only send one single line of SMS text to yourself 5 years ago, what would it be?
Yes. So I had to think a lot about this one. This was a tricky one. So what I said was, you have no idea what the world will look like 5 years from now, so stop worrying so much about having a rigid life plan. And I think to me, and this again comes to the space that we're in right now, is that I never thought I'd be working in this space because I didn't even really know it existed 5 years. Of course, I heard about Bitcoin or something like that, but I didn't know that social impact Web3 would be this huge movement. I didn't know that this would be where my career was going. And I was worried about having some specific rigid life plan about how I was going to work my way up through X organization and get to this position. And really, none of it really matters because you don't know what the world's going to look like 5 years in the future. So I think that was something that, I would tell myself to stop worrying so much about having this defined perfect plan for the future, because the future is not going to be anything like what you think it'll be like 5 years from now.
It rings so true, especially at the rate that technology is exponentially increasing at this point.
Yeah.
The world can look very different in the next 3 to 5, let alone 10 years. It's just, new things are coming, and it'll shift the way we behave, the way we do and interact. Like some other previous conversations, pandemics coming in and all these nature causes that are happening around the world. You really don't know at what point in time your life could shift. So,
absolutely, 100%, yeah.
And finally, Drew, how could people reach out or learn more about crypto altruism?
Yeah, definitely. So the easiest and best way is just to head to my website, cryptoaltruism.org. That is where my blog and podcast lives and all my resources. You can also follow me on Twitter at crypto_altruism. Or shoot me an email, info@cryptoaltruism.org. The Crypto Altruism podcast as well, if you want to learn more about that or check it out, is available on Spotify, Google Podcasts, and through my website. But yeah, shoot me a DM. My DMs are always open on Twitter, or send me a message to my website, or shoot me an email. I'm always looking to connect with new folks, to feature new products on my podcast, and to learn more. So yeah, definitely don't be afraid to reach out.
Thank you so much, Drew, for taking the time for this interview and podcast. You've taught me so much in this space, and you're truly a wealth of knowledge in this space. You're clearly in the front row seat, learning all about it. So I really appreciate all that you've taught me in this episode. Thank you so much.
And thank you. It has been an absolute pleasure, and I learn something new every time I talk to someone new as well. And it's been an absolute pleasure chatting with you and learning about you and hearing from you. So thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the show. All the links to the show notes will be available at kevinleesocial.com, spelled KEVINLY. Conversely, if you have any interviews that you'd love to recommend, please send it over to kevinleesocial@gmail.com. I'd love to connect. Thank you. Until the next episode.